Hello, our truth warriors, and welcome back to the Atlantic Underground. Micheal Yon has his books on his books. Micheal Yon has his boots on the ground for this incredible interview. We spoke to him last when he was in Bangkok, but today he's in the thick of something different. There's something big happening in Panama that the world is not hearing about. Micheal, can you tell us what you're seeing down there? But first of all, are you safe at the moment?
Yeah, at the moment, safe. Tomorrow, I don't know. As you know, Panama has a huge history. It's so interesting, so many aspects of it. The first town for Westerners in all of the Americas, not in the islands, but on the mainland of South or North America, was near me in the Darien. Now it's in modern day Colombia, but it's called Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien. So the realization of how, sorry, the cleaning lady was just leaving.
Oh,
The realization, I'm not in front of the canal. That's actually a green screen, which is actually my wall. There's no green screen. This technology is great. So that's a photo behind me of that I took last week with a helicopter over the canal. But anyway, back to the story. Since the beginning of exploration it goes back at least 500 years when Christopher Columbus was coming by the coast of Panama in 1502, 1503. He was looking for a passage to India. That's why we call all the people Indians, right? And I think we all know that. And then Balboa came afterwards, and he founded a town in what is now Colombia, but it's the Darien, called Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien. So that was the first actual settlement of Westerners on the mainland, North, South, Central America, or whatever. And why did he pick that spot when he was all up and down the coast? I mean, he was there had between the time that Balboa between when Christopher Columbus came to Balboa, that now we're already talking, a good 10 years. People had explored quite a lot at that point. I mean, they were really getting over here, right? And there was a lot of ships back then. A lot of people don't realize it wasn't just like one or two ships around the seas. The seas were filled with ships. And were mapping the coast, and they realized that this area here where I'm at now was really important. And then Balboa, he was the first Westerner Spaniard or Westerner in general, who spotted the South Seas, which is the Pacific. They called it the South Sea because actually Panama, the long axis is mostly east-west, not north-south. Although people have it in their mind, generally speaking, that it's north-south for, I don't know, because I think it's because, Mexico and Central America kind of go north-south. But then you get down here to this little part and it goes, and it goes down to South America. So that's what actually kind of happens, right? And so he called it. So he got up on a hill down in the Darien, and he spotted the Pacific Ocean. He claimed it for Spain. It was a pretty big claim, the Pacific Ocean. Somebody alert the natives, and like the natives on the other side would be like Japan and China. And a lot in between, thousands of swords, right? Thousands of languages, thousands of cultures. But back down to Darien, they realized, hey, if we can make a path between these seas, I mean, that's a huge deal. I mean, we could literally, do trade between anyway, for, obvious reasons. So that, when Balboa was crossing the Darien on one of his trips, in the old days, guys would get off of a ship somewhere and make another ship. You know what I mean? They didn't play around. These weren't your average sailors. You know what I'm saying? Like when my family went shipwrecked in 1609 in the what's now the Bahamas, they were shipwrecked for 10 months in a ship called the Sea Venture, right? It got in a hurricane or something. They made another ship and went to Jamestown, right? So they made two actually. I mean, this was the kind of people we're dealing with in this time. They're like, yeah, no boat, no problem. We'll make another one. And so that's what, so when Balboa didn't have a way to get around yet, he came across the Darien and made another boat, and continued to march. And anyway, he was, so he made that town Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien, and in 1510, and it lasted for 14 years. It was quite a town if you look at old illustrations of it. And then the Indians and other things ran them out by 1524. So it lasted about 14 years. But it's famous in this part of the world, but Westerners don't seem to know much about it. And then, of course, people continued to try to make a path between the seas. About 80 years later, the Scottish showed up, right? And the Scottish in 1698-ish, 99, they were trying to make the Darien, the New Caledonia, right? New Edinburgh. They called it two different names. And the Darien scheme, as it became known, they raised a lot of money to make a path between the seas. They knew they could enrich Scotland by doing that, right? And they came and they attempted to do so, and they went bankrupt. So about 2,000 dead Scots later, and bankruptcy for Scotland, that was a main reason why Scotland is now today part of the United Kingdom, because in the Articles of Union, 1706, 1707, finished in 1707, boom, Scotland is now part of the United Kingdom because of the Darien. Then the French came, tried to build a canal across this is called the Darien Isthmus. It's also called the Isthmus of Panama, right? So it's called both, right? So it depends on how, what time frame you're reading about. I still call it just Darien because I'm down in the Darien all the time. But so then the French came, they gave it a good go, and they went bankrupt. And then Americans came. You should see some of these studies that they were doing of Nicaragua, and I mean, like detailed studies. I've got some of the books here. They're quite interesting books, and these are originals from I got one here that I was looking at last night from 1870. I've been spending night after night in this book. It's amazing. So the one from 1870 was a reconnaissance through the Darien. At this similar time, there was people up in Nicaragua doing the same, Americans, right? Yeah. So that you should see the studies they were doing. It's detailed, man. The type that only Navy people do. Navy people are famous for their doing Navy stuff. I was Army, but you look at Navy stuff, and I was talking with a senior officer last night. He's retired from the Navy, and a couple of them said the same thing, actually. The reason we Navy people made such good stuff, charts and everything, stars and everything, you wouldn't believe some of the stuff I find in these old books, is because they're stuck on the ship. There's no distractions, right? Yeah. The only distraction is like a hurricane or something, So you're on the ship and you're focused. And so these Navy guys would get off and do these reconnaissance in the jungle, like this one from 1870. They came with about 100 miles of, it said about 100 miles of telegraph wire you'll be supplied with. So they came and they rolled out telegraph wire because they knew it was less than 100 miles across, but they needed, more than 100 miles to do that. So they came over, they had everything. And they're finding the coal. They need coal, of course, because back then it was wind and coal, right? Yeah. We didn't have oil-powered ships yet. It was wind and coal, right? And so when one of the first things they look for is we need good coal. And then they're starting to take the specific gravity of the coal, and they're testing it when it burns. How much smoke does it give off? Because you don't want your Navy ships, puffing out black smoke everywhere like the black ships were in, when they came to Japan in 1853 and 54. Commodore Matthew Perry. I've got his reports to Congress. I picked them up in Tokyo. They're unbelievable. Originals. These are like color drawings of the birds. They look like photographs. And so it's the same thing here when they're doing the reconnaissance here. They're checking the depths of the rivers everywhere they go. They're checking the coal. They're just checking everything. Actually, one of the specific instructions in the orders to the officer who was leading, what was his name? Selfridge, I think. To the name of the officer who was leading the reconnaissance in 1870 was, keep good relations with the Indians and under no means give them firearms or let's say basically whiskey. It was like a intoxicating spirits or something like that. Basically, don't give them alcohol. We'll end up with wild Indians with guns, right? And that's what the Spanish used to do. The Spanish used to use whiskey like crazy as a weapon, right? And like in Guatemala, I found a book from 1648. I found it in Argentina. And the Spaniards, and it describes how the Spaniards were getting the Indians drunk up in Guatemala in the 1600s and taken advantage of them. Anyway, all this area has been so important since those times, right? Finally, we came after a lot of reconnaissance. You have no idea what's in all these books. The maps that fold out like 6 feet, like detailed in every, like map after map after map, just like stacks of maps. And then they start building the canal. And I have a lot of those books and maps as well. And so, of course, the canal was finished in 1914. But along the way, we also, in this big architecture of doing things, created Panama. So not only did they create the canal, they created Panama to create the canal, right? So, I mean, this is like bigger than a lot of, it's not just a little ditch that they built between the seas. The canal itself, standalone, just looking at the canal, it is awesome. It is an unbelievable work of engineering. It's still working since 1914. They've made some upgrades and made another canal beside it that kind of flows with it through Gatun Lake. But anyway, because we have bigger ships now, right? So but the old canal still works. I mean, I've been through the old canal quite a few times, and the locks are, as we speak, there will be ships in the locks right now as we speak, right? Yeah. And so they're, opening and closing the same doors that were made in 1914. And so since that time, basically Panama is, even if it did not have the canal at all, let's say it was too wide or the mountains were too big, this would still be important terrain, right? Very important. But it does have the canal, which makes it like 100 times more important. But because even since the 1500s, military operations have been run out of Panama and exploration operations since the 1500s, right? And so this has been important for, for instance, Sir Francis Drake. I think some British have heard of him before. He was running around right around through. He did some of his attacks right out my window here. You know what I'm saying? And he was, I mean, like right here, and he was stealing tons of silver from the Spaniards coming through the Darien. They were coming through. This is unbelievable what this is here. This is so, they're building a pathway down to Colombia now, which a lot of people deny that that's happening, but they don't. If somebody denies that that's happening, that they don't know what they're talking about. 100% they don't know what even if they're Panamanian, they don't know. When I first found that they were building those 2 bridges down there about a year and a half ago, I drove up from Darien. It was about 6 hours, and I came talking with people in the government, and I'm like, hey, who's building those 2 bridges down to Colombia? They're like, we're not building anything to Colombia. I'm like, yeah, you are. And they're like, no, we're not. And I'm like, you are. And they're like, well, how do you? And I'm like, look at the mud on my boots. I was just there this morning. It's like 100% you're building down there, and here's the photos, right? And so, and if you look at the azimuth of the 2 bridges, how they line up, the first one is at Yavitsa, and then another one is near El Real. It's a village. There's no roads to El Real. But if you look at the azimuth of those 2 bridges, boom, it's the way that people have imagined building a road since 300 or 400 years, about 400 years, right? So on old maps that I've found, it's like if you were going to build a road or, something really organized, a train or something, you would do it right exactly on that azimuth, right? There's no question what they're doing because they're building it up from Colombia too. It's clearly the ant trails are going to meet. And then this will be open, so it'll be a path between the seas and a path between the continents, right? Yeah. And this is, if you want to do, military strikes coming or going from here, you don't need to refuel to hit Florida and Texas and all the Gulf Coast, right? This is a perfect base for South American operations and Central and Mexico and North American operations. This is an unbelievable vantage point, even without the canal, right? And so, but it has the canal. And so this is going to be Panama, because of its location, like Poland, like Hawaii, will always be a place that's contested. Hawaii is, a lot of people don't realize it, but it's also being contested in subtle ways now. And eventually it will make its, I first wrote about this maybe 10 years ago or more, Hawaii. But anyway, these strategic places will always be contested. And Panama is like the navel of the world, like the belly button navel of the world. You know, Mahan, the famous naval philosopher, was here in Panama. That's where he got some of his inspiration for his work. You know, Einstein's head is like, there's a statue of his head about 5 minutes from me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, everybody who is somebody has studied, I mean, strategic thinkers, big thinkers. If they're big global thinkers, they have all thought about Panama, and many of them have come here. Again, you know, Sir Francis Drake, of course, Einstein, the whole works. President Grant, when he was maybe a captain or a major, came through. Of course, he was going through because they were having problems in San Francisco with the gold rush. And of course, the gold rush is one of the ways that the railroad got built up. So you should see the prices on the old railroad, man. The prices on the old railroad to go through here, because this is an intercontinental railroad, right? It's only about hour and a half trip. I mean, I've done it back and forth, and but it's not a passenger train anymore. Actually, I got to ride in the locomotive with Masako Gana and about a year and a half ago. But the price to get a horse across was 5 ounces of gold. I found that in one of my old books. And this is a contemporaneous book. So this was a book from the 1850s or 60s. And I've got it right over here. But it was like 5 ounces of gold. Today, that would be $15,000. Now, it was an ounce for a person. So that would be about $3,000 today, right? Think about that. An ounce. But here's your choices. If you want to go from, you know, Virginia to San Francisco to get you some gold or something, then here's your choices. You can go and fight the Apaches or Comanches or whatever is between you and getting over there by land, or you can go around South America, which is going to be really expensive and super dangerous and very time consuming, or you can come to Darien and you can walk across. Good luck. And or you can take the train. And so people would take the train. An ounce of gold. And of course, I did the, well, I mean, the bottom line is it was the only show in town. There was no competition, and you could take it or leave it. You could take it or you could walk across, and your chance, like when Grant showed up, and he had, you know, this is before the train was open, because he was trying to get to San Francisco. They were having some problems in San Francisco, so they sent the army, and Grant was a captain or a major at the time, so he landed on the Cologne side, what's now called the Cologne side, and he had already made arrangements to pick up some donkeys to help his people get across army, and they had children with them, and but the people going to the gold rush bought all the donkeys. So when he showed up, he didn't have any donkeys, right? And so that was before the train, and so he started to walk. He was hoofing it. He's a soldier, right? And every child died. How many children was it? I think it may have been about 20. I'm sorry on the numbers. I've forgotten, my memory faded on that. But it's about, it was all the children died. A lot of his people died. And actually, some of them were buried not far from me here, and they've been moved to another cemetery, the National Cemetery, but which is also not far away. So I mean, all these things happened right here. But you know, so when they opened the train, you know, again, go ahead, run across the jungle if you want to, and good luck. Or you can pay your ounce of gold. And, you know, they were bringing in, it's interesting. I also found where somebody brought beehives in. Apparently there was no beehives in San Francisco back at that time. They didn't have honeybees apparently over there. I have no idea about that. You know, it's so fascinating, but this place, I'm setting the stage historically, because history, it rhymes very intensely, not just vaguely. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. This is a center of gravity. Now, China and the United States are going to fight. Now, are they going to kinetically fight? I do not know. Trump said he's going to hand over, you know, the ports to. I took a helicopter last week, flew over the whole canal, and, you know, photographed the ports that they're talking about. I put them on my Substack. So a lot of what I'm talking about is on my Substack. These photos, videos of the canal I took last week in the helicopter. But you can see the ports that, for instance, the one at Balboa Port, which is owned by Hutchison Whampoa. And that's the one that Trump wants to take from the Chinese and sell to his buddies at BlackRock. And now the Chinese are pushing back hard. So all these people that think it's a done deal, well, think again, because, that's like saying, hey, we're going to go to war with you and we're going to beat you. Okay, whatever. Okay, that always has a way of not going the way people imagined, right? And so the sale has not gone through, and it's far from it. Now it's going to be, and keep in mind, Panama is a juicy lamb in the middle. They're defenseless, and it's a clash of titans, right? And again, the port's right very close to me now, and the sale has not gone through. Now, what I'm getting to is, and by the way, a lot of Americans think that 38,000 Americans died building the canal. That's just Trump with his bullshit again. He lies all the time. I don't know why he lies all the time, because the truth would be actually more potent. The truth would be far more potent, because they are in violation of the treaty, period. You don't need to lie about that. I mean, like, obviously in violation of the treaty, right? Like nakedly obvious, right? So why do you make up the 38,000 stuff? So, I mean, I think it's a, actually, I've got one of the books that has the casualties right here. The book is from 1903. The canal, or sorry, 1913. And the canal was finished months later in 1914. It's got the casualties year by year. And what it's like, it's a much lower number. It might be just, I don't know, shave off about a zero, and that'll be about the approximate accurate number. But the number of Americans who died, maybe 200 or 300, actually. So maybe a couple of zeros. But anyway, but the canal, the canal, the Panamanians run the canal. It's not run by Chinese, but people get confused, and I can see where the confusion comes from. It's not because they're not paying attention. It's because it is confusing to start with. There is the canal. Let's just imagine the canal as a highway, because that's what it is. So Panama runs that highway, that water highway. They run it and they operate it. However, there are these stores on the canal, ports. They're ports, right? Gas stations, ports. Yeah. So the ports are run by private companies, and two of the major ones on each side are Chinese, right? And so those are the ones that people are upset about. There's others that are owned by others, like Taiwanese, right? So so if they were owned by Japanese, we wouldn't be talking about it. But they're owned by Chinese. And so, do they run the canal? No. Could they destroy the canal? Look, anybody with any kind of capability in 2025 could do it. You should see the Japanese and Germans' plans for doing this in the 1940s. It's unbelievable. Like, I mean, I've got quite a bit of information on that, including a book and that sort of thing. Like, the Chinese made a special submarine to take out the canal called the I-400, which was secret, I think, until maybe 20 or 25 years ago. And so, but they were, could put 3 airplanes in it, and very detailed. They had spies around here. They had a spy out in Darien running a communications radio up on top of a mountain. I don't know how they communicated with him, maybe by pigeons, I'm guessing. And I know people laugh when I say pigeons, but pigeons are the British and Americans. We used to have pigeon units. So I think the French might still have a pigeon unit. Anybody with a brain would still have a pigeon unit. That's pretty secure, forms of communication. I've read 2 books on pigeon warfare, you might say, because in Afghanistan and Iraq, especially Afghanistan, they were using pigeons a lot. And I'm like, how does this thing work? You know what I mean? I know how a pigeon works, obviously, more or less. But how does this, how do they do it? And then I started to realize, wow, pigeons, when you go to Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo, the big sort of Arlington of Japan. Now, some people get upset when I say it's the Arlington of Japan. They're like, you don't know about blah, blah, blah. All right. And I always ask them, how many people are buried at Yasukuni? And they're like, I don't know, thousands. And I'm like, no, actually 0. Okay. So the bottom line is, you don't know anything about Yasukuni. I'm there all the time, right? I buy books down the road at the old antique bookstores from there all the time. So I'm at Yasukuni all the time. And so, but Yasukuni, there's a monument there for pigeons, right? And because the Japanese believe they got monuments for dogs and pigeons and what else? Horses, donkeys, because anything that helped them in the war, right, is considered, is revered, right, including pigeons. The British in World War II, you guys had airplanes with two pigeons in each airplane, according to a book I read. So when the pilots would crash, they would write their location down and release one of the pigeons, and then next day they would release the other one. So, yeah, man, British. And according to this book, a lot of people were rescued from those pigeons. Those pigeons can go hundreds of miles, man, like 60 miles an hour. They're cooking, man. And so you could easily do the spy stuff up here in Panama, release a pigeon down to the guy in the Darien up on the hilltop, because he had a radio up on a hill. It's still a remote place. It's near where they're building those bridges down there to Colombia. That's deep in the jungle still. So I mean, so I'm guessing they did it by pigeon, because you could get the message to him, within hour and a half, and then he could go on radio, right? Write down, 8 ships, da 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 da, pigeon, poop, release, radio, and he's safely back where they're not checking for radio signals, right? Because he's way out in the jungle, far away. And by the way this pigeon stuff works is you raise them in one place, and then the place, you put them on an airplane or whatever when you want to use them, a ship, it doesn't matter. Carry them with they used to have whole pigeon units that would carry, and you take the pigeons out, and then they will go home. So they'll go back to where they were raised. That's how it works. It's really simple, super fast, highly secure. That's why there was also units for shooting down pigeons. But in any case, back to the Panama Canal. This has been the Japanese and Germans had an incredible plan for taking this thing down. And it's a wonder they didn't do it, because, Japanese and Germans, pretty capable people, to put it mildly, right? And luckily, the Japanese didn't have enough materials, because the war effort was working on reducing their amount of material to create those submarines. Of course, we didn't know they were making the submarines. And they just released it like 20, 25 years ago that the I-400s even existed. And so the Americans, we actually, before Pearl Harbor, we thought that the Japanese would attack here. We thought they were going to attack in Panama. So we had these chemical units with smoke. There was thousands of smoke pots out in the jungle with units, soldiers stationed with the smoke pots. And if they heard the sirens, they were all supposed to sound their own sirens up and down the canal, and everybody light those thousands of smoke pots, which were on both sides of the canal. And so no matter which way the wind blew, it was going to be hard to see the targets, right? It was all kinds of. So one young soldier, he was a young sergeant. I found a book. I got the book where he's describing, he was here, 1942. This guy, young guy, he decides to sound the alarm to call his troops back. What an idea. And he didn't realize that all the other people that heard the siren, his siren, because there were sirens all up and down, he did the crank, and all the sirens went off. And before you know it, I think we had in the book maybe 79 fighter aircraft in the sky. They were shooting into the sky like almost 10,000 rounds, because they listed the ammunition. It was 9,000 something rounds of all kinds of ammunition. And there was nothing going on. And, ships were turning around. Marines were, coming out of other parts of Panama to get to the canal, and the army was too. And it was all because some young soldier. And you know what? What's funny is the soldier, he's in the book, he describes how he met with 2 generals subsequent that, because of his something he should not have done. They discovered holes in our defenses. And so actually, in a case of strong leadership, he was sent to OCS, Officer Candidate School. I've heard of stuff like that happen before. Some young soldier does something really wrong, not maliciously. He's young, and you're apt to do stupider things when you're younger. But they saw high qualities in him, and they sent him off to OCS, and he lived happily ever after and did quite well in the military. That was back when you didn't get destroyed for if you actually are honestly a good soldier or good material, let's say. They're going to try to correct you and keep you in. Now it's more like off to the gallows,
Yeah, I thought you were going to say he was peeling potatoes for the rest of his life. But speaking about what's going on with the military and the ships in the area, now I had a report this morning that there is US military heading down there. They're sending a destroyer down there right now. Are you seeing any buildup of military presence at the canal now, signaling intent on what they're planning on doing, which is to basically take back these ports from the Chinese.
I mean, just this morning, hours ago, there's a little U.S. drone, and I just put it on Substack. If you look on
Yeah, the
Substack,
sea drone, I saw that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's in the port down the road from me right now as we speak, and it's maybe getting repaired or something. And but the Panamanians have been saying they've been seeing those here for a couple of years out in the water, and so the little sail going down, and so it's partly sail, and I mean partly uses wind actually, interestingly. Um, but they also have a little motor and a propeller on and that sort of thing. But now keep in mind, the United States is quite close to Panama. So we can flat-footed, if they were going to invade, without setting up really any serious FOBs, forward operating bases, you could launch from Florida and Texas and aircraft carriers and all that sort of thing and be here with huge amounts of troops like really quickly in a matter of hours, And so it's like if suddenly you see a lot of C-17s taken off from U.S. Military bases, please let me know. It's funny. A couple of months ago, I mean, I'm watching, but I might miss it. A couple of months ago, I published on my Substack. I think I put it on Substack that if there's going to be a military, we don't really have to. A lot of Panamanians want us to take the canal back.
Yeah.
A lot of them want us to take it back. But if anybody tried to destroy it, obviously, then you need to stop that. But the bottom line is if we're going to do it, we can do it flat-footed. And I talked about this about 2 months ago, and I said, a logical time would be something like March 14th. And the reason I said March 14th is, it wasn't random, but it's obviously guessing, is because it's a full moon, it's dry season, and it's a weekend, right? So most of the people will be away from because in Panama City, a lot of them leave the city for the weekend. So big traffic jams and they leave, and it was a full moon. So you're either going to want to do it, if possible, on a dark or a bright moon, depending on what the commanders want or need, if the politicos will let them go and the other factors align. But that would be one factor you would consider, would be moon phase, obviously. And so on March 15th, I'm looking out my windows, and it's night, and I'm like, okay, the moon's bright. It's like 98%. And you can look on the moon phase and see what I mean. The weather's clear. And boom, there was an explosion. And this was Saturday night. And most of the power across Panama went out. Now, keep in mind, in 1989, an Operation Just Cause, the electricity was turned off before the invasion. Right, it was a dark night. It was a darker night. It wasn't new moon, but it was pretty dark if you look at the moon phase, and obviously in a lot of the attacks I've been in the wars, we turn off their comms, obviously, and turn off their. Sometimes you leave the comms on if you want to hear what people are saying. Then you leave them on. If you want them to not communicate, if you prioritize them not communicating over what are they communicating about, then you leave them on, right? Mm-hmm. And so I saw both things happen during the wars. Sometimes like we're going to leave them on because we want to hear what they're talking about. But the electricity went out Saturday night, and Panamanians, their phones were still working and social media still working, and the generator kicked on for me. So I still had everything, and everything blinked, went off for a minute. And I'm like, oh, bingo. Everything's blinking. I'm looking outside. No flashes, no bangs, no booms, no helicopters flying low, jets, noises, nothing. But the Panamanians are on social media like, oh, the Americans are coming, here they come. And some are like, yay, and others like, boo, but it turned out to be an explosion at the power station at Chorora. And they got the power back on in some hours. But there was no invasion. Now, what was going on with that? I do not know. Was it China sending a warning? Was it America testing the waters, and watching reactions? Was it background noise? Because, explosions do happen and power plants do have problems. So, I mean, it can be all kinds of things. It can be a bird. I don't know. I don't know what did it, but it's working now. Everybody was on pins and needles there for a while, but I expect something will happen. Will it be military? I don't know. But again, you can do a lot of this flat-footed from Texas, from Florida, from North Carolina, from all of our bases. You can come right out of Fort Bragg, boom, right here, right? I mean, C-17s can go pretty far. And they were practicing landing here maybe 6 months ago or 4 or 5 months ago. A lot of C-17s were landing near me, coming in low at Howard Air Force Base. Now, that was before Trump was in office, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so when you look at the fact pattern, there are things that transcend Trump's time in office, right? There's a larger thing at play, and it's not like, and then Trump's in charge and bingo. There's other things going on. You see the bombing going on over in Yemen now. Of course, that's related to Suez Canal. That's related to Bab al-Mandeb and also Iran, because, obviously the Zionists want to use the American force to attack, and Trump is a Zionist, right? And he's open about it. So, and by the way, Zionism is not a religion, and it's not Judaism, right? Many Zionists are Christians, many are Muslims, many are atheists. I've taken 2 atheist Zionists down into the Darien Gap, Brett Weinstein and Laura Loomer, right? And so there's Zionism is not Judaism, full stop. And the first people that'll tell you that are the Orthodox Jews. They're like, hey, that's not us. That's like a political party like Democrats or Republicans or something, but then they try to make it look like it's us so that they can, if you say something bad about us, you're saying something bad about Jews. No, it's a political party. Like the Chinese Communist Party is not China. It's a political party that took over China, right? Yeah. And so Zionism is a political party which consists of Muslims, Christians, atheists, Jews, and many of the people that are most against Zionists are Jews. I mean, they fight like crazy. And then within the Zionist movement, because it's made out of humans they always break down within their units, like Catholic Church splits into different parts, 1 and 2 Muslims, Sunni, Shia, and then Sunni in many different directions, Shia, and Zionism does the same thing. It's not like Zionism is a monolith. It's not a rock. It's got all kind of fractures and infighting and that sort of thing. But the bottom line is in one of those factions, Trump is a member of one of those factions, right? And those factions want to go to war with Iran, and they want to take Gaza. That will put them in a good position to take Suez, not Israel. Israel is another. You got to keep in mind. I bought a bond actually from 1899 in an antique bookstore here, and it's a bond by Theodore Herzl, one of the founders of the old party to take Palestine, and I bought it. It's an old bond. It's not bearing any fruits right now, but it's sitting there, but it was raising money to take Palestine. This is 1899, right? Yeah. And so this is going back, way back, goes back in time, and I think what we're seeing here in Panama is actually more of a fight between Zionists and Chinese, just like I see in Argentina and down in the Middle East. It's Zionists versus who has ever got the Suez Canal, Egypt, and whoever's got Gaza, the people in Gaza, and whoever has the Strait of Hormuz, Iran, right? You know what I mean? If you control the Strait of Hormuz, you have severe influence over Russia, right? And all the countries there, like serious influence. They don't want Iran. They want Strait of Hormuz, right? They know they can't take, so and that will allow you to constrict the Russians as well. See, there's a big game at play here. And I tell Panamanians all the time, be careful, when you're making public threats to do something violent to Americans, because that can have consequences later on, right? Because these giants that are fighting for Panama, they're not fighting because they want you. They're fighting because they want that canal, like the people in North Carolina that got smashed by the hurricane, and then our government left them to die and rot, or in Lanai in Hawaii. Yeah, they're doing it to Americans. The Zionists did it to Israelis over on October 7th. They allowed Israelis to be slaughtered so they would have casus belli to take Gaza, right? They will do it to you. If you kill some Americans here, I guarantee you'll have parachutists coming instantly, and nobody will ever apologize. And keep in mind, we're called colonizers here, but the people that are here colonized the indigenous people, right? I mean, who were colonized by the Spaniards, right? It's a sediment of colonizers, and Hawaii is the same way, right? I mean, all these places, most of them are the same way. I'm not sure that Japan is, but most of these places are sediments of colonizers, right? And whoever's, the bad guy is the one that's on the very top. You know what I mean? What's that saying? If you get into a fight with somebody and a cop shows up, make sure to, if you're on top, make sure to roll the guy on top of you real quickly. So I mean, so we've got that going on in Panama right now. You've got this anthropological warfare going on between like the Kuna and the Nobe Bogle Indians. I think the Nobe Bogle might go violent tomorrow because yesterday or 2 days ago they were calling them all back to the reservation, the comarca they call it here, and because you see the anthropological warfare where people are trying to split the indigenous people like the Imbara, Kuna, Wunan, Nobe Bogle, and all these guys, trying to split them apart, which is pretty effective. They're in their reservations. Now they have their reservations, like the Nobe Bogle reservation was opened in 1997, right? And so this is all new, right? And this is all about divide and conquer. This is a long game. You can't understand what's happening by just looking at the newspapers today. That's not going to be very much helpful, actually. You need to look at where the flows is. Where's the flood line? Where does it, what happens here when the rains hit the mountains? Where's the highest mark on the rocks? You know what I mean? And so what I see happening here is Panama is being ripped apart. It's a long game. The Panama that we know, in my view, as somebody who studies war and goes off the wars year after year around the world, is that Panama in the long term won't survive. I don't see that. That's why you see all these people that are asking me places to move, and they pick Panama. And I'm like, don't do it unless you want war. I mean, I'm telling you, this place is going to get split apart, right? And for instance, a lot of Israelis are moving here as a settlement, right? And they're looking at Guatemala and Argentina as well. And there are we live right now? Because if we're live, I'm not going to say cut something.
No, we're not live. No.
When will it air? Because if it's like tomorrow, I'll say something.
Yeah,
if you're airing it today, I'm not going
to. Tomorrow, yeah.
Okay, so if you're airing it tomorrow, then I'll tell you. For instance, Heritage is traveling now, which is big Zionist influence. They're traveling now and doing a country tour. I don't want to say it live because I don't want to jeopardize their security.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Even though I'm in opposition, I don't hate them. You know what I mean? Where it's like and so we're in opposition on that. On other things, we're in concordance, right? But they're down. They're doing a trip now between Argentina and Guatemala and Panama and a couple of other places, right? So these are the places where I see when I travel that Zionists are looking at making an increased footprint, and they're heavy here in Panama and have been for centuries, right? Yeah. So, well, Zionists not so long, but the Jews and then Zionists come later, and people that are experts in the history of this, you should just get them on and let them talk. It's fascinating. I mean, it's a huge history. It's like the history of the Gulf of Mexico. You know what I'm saying? It's deep and it's broad.
Do you think there could be a false flag that could trigger something down there? I only say this because I started literally with us having a time difference. I decided just to double check on the time difference between me and yourself. And underneath on the search kept popping up, when to watch, where to watch. And they're talking about a football match tonight in California that is Panama versus the US in soccer. And it's apparently the semi-finals of some soccer cup that they're playing in. And me being me, it pops in my mind, wouldn't that be a perfect opportunity for a false flag that could kick something off that would allow the US to then come in and put further military in, and then also literally block access to certain ports within that canal?
Yeah, I mean, well, the United States wouldn't want to block the ports. But the big protest starting tomorrow, they may actually block the ports, and they've said that they will actually. Yeah. And that would be Suntrax, and there was 68 labor unions and unions that met last weekend, right, about doing this and getting their plans together. Now, the government has been crystal clear that they're not going to let you do that, and they're going to, not let you close the and close the canal or any of that, right? Or not the canal, but the ports. As far as I know, they don't. The protesters don't plan to go for the canal. I think they know that will get them spanked hard, right? Like the U.S. would come, and they can talk all the trash that they want, but at the end of the day, they know if we come, it will not be pretty, right? Whoever wins, there'll be a lot of blood, right? And if it's kinetic, right? If it just because the military comes, it doesn't mean it's going to be, kinetic, but it would be, obviously, in service of that. And so now I said what maybe a year ago, and I published this maybe a year and a half. You remember the white guy that shot and killed the two people in the street?
Down in Panama, or
Yeah, he's in prison
yeah.
right now, right? So that guy, I had told some friends here, including Matt Tomlett, and he published this. I called up Matt and I said, you know what? This was the day before he shot those guys in the streets. I called Matt and I warned a few others. I was like, just based on stuff, I can't really, mathematically say why I think this. It's just, after years, you can kind of like, I think, that gator is going to go for that dog, and
Yeah.
and I called up Matt and some others, and I said, I would not be surprised to see a white guy shoot somebody dead in the streets very soon, and then the Panamanians start to attack, especially Americans, right? And to try to run them out of here. And boom, the next day, shot dead. Two people, white guy, right? And it was like, you look at the videos of that, it was like made for television. It was like the perfect cameras in the perfect place, perfect. I'm a photographer, right? I
Yeah.
shoot with the best, right? This is the same kind of camera that was being used when Trump was, up there and the bullets whizzing by. Sony Alpha One, that's the best money can buy right there, right? So I know photography and I know combat photography. I've done more combat photography than real combat. There's war photography, and then there's no shit combat photography. That's what I did a lot, right? With British forces, US forces, and out there alone. And so the bottom line is I know combat photography. And when I saw that, the way that they captured that, that was either like a shot of a lifetime type thing, or that was a setup. Like,
Yeah.
you've got the guy with the pistol and the shell casings coming out, the lights perfect behind him, everything's set up, and the camera guys in the right location with the right gear and shooting on the right settings. And okay, pretty lucky, huh?
Yeah.
And so, but that was a perfect setup. I think a glitch in the matrix was, because I think that was actually an attempt that causes to try to cause. I don't know if that was by who would have set that up, but that guy was involved with the mining and all this other stuff. He's older now, but he's in prison, right? He's in the same prison that Noriega was in. But the guy that did the shooting. Now, why did he do that? And now, and who, if anybody, was behind it? I strongly suspect somebody. Just 24 hours in advance, I was saying I would not doubt if a white guy does that. That's how I've got an intuitive sense for how this horse bucks. You know what I mean? But nothing happened because they found out he had a Panamanian ID card, what they call a cedula, right? So the Panamanian police were like, whoa, 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 because everybody was getting riled up. People were talking about doing violence against Americans in particular, right? And then the police are like, no, 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 calm down. He has a Panamanian ID card. So the Panamanian's like, yay, okay, not yay, but they weren't happy. But
Yeah.
but they were sufficiently calmed down because he was Panamanian, right? Now he's one of the mixed background, but he's Panamanian. He's Panamanian. So the Panamanians calmed down. But what I'm getting to is I think that was actually an attempt, but it was just the powder was a little bit wet and it didn't go off.
Yeah. So what's the reason behind the riots and protests there at the moment? And is this likely to get to a stage where it could again? We spoke about false flags a minute ago. You spoke about this guy shooting somebody a while back now, but if this escalates within the protests, firstly, what are they for? Why are they happening? And would it be a perfect time for them to maybe attack some US citizens or US military or somebody of importance down there? You know, pretty much like the false flags we've seen with the likes of Franz Duke Ferdinand, you know, the Reichstag event. It just takes one person to trigger this. Is there a possibility something like that could happen? And would that be the perfect excuse for the US to come in and start taking action?
Absolutely. And I've been publishing it. I said it on, I think, Alex Jones last week and Bannon and a lot of other interviews. I've been saying, I think there are multiple people that want to see this fall apart for multiple reasons. The Chinese want the white people out. That'll give them more control, right? So, and the Zionists need to cause us belly for, you know, America to use our military force, right? I mean, I can see Reed. I'm not saying that that's what'll happen, but that is the habit, right? That is the habit. They all do false flags. It's just normal day-to-day operations. And actually, for the people that still don't quite get that yet, they're like so far behind that it's kind of difficult to talk with them because they think that this is an exotic technique that's not used often. It's used like daily, man. It's like, you know, but it's often used in small places, in small ways that you don't see, that are they're not international incidents, right? Often it's more small, like, hey, we need to get those guys riled up against these guys for some local thing that never even makes the news, right? And so, and when I went to Special Forces training, they even talked and trained about this. And I was like, America does this actually, you know, I was like, that's wow, huh. In any case, you know, and so I was a very young soldier. You know, I was 19 going through selection, and then, you know, blah blah blah. But I was never involved in anything like that. But it's just kind of a wake up. But so what will happen? I don't know. But if some Americans are to be attacked, tomorrow or in the coming days will be an opportune moment because there will be big protests. Now, what you asked what the protests are about. Mostly, actually, they're about different things. Whenever I go to big protests, it'll be like save the whales and save the trees and I hate, you know, Reagan or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because I've been to a lot of protests. I didn't go to any of the anti-Reagan, but I went to anti-Bush protests when I was researching something else in San Francisco. And from a distance, it's always like, this is anti-Bush, but you show up and it's anti all kinds of other stuff or pro other stuff, right? And then they all get grouped in. So it'll be about one of the main aspects is Social Security. The economy is terrible here. And the government saying that you may have to work 2 or 3 extra years, right? And so, and also, so you'll have to pay more into the system, right? And in fact, I think you must pay, if my memory is accurate on this, now you have to pay like 180 payments over your life to get Social Security. And I think they may increase that to 300. I'm unclear on that. I need to check that with a lawyer. But because and another thing is the copper mine. The copper mine is a crucial aspect of this that's going on. The Nobe Bugle they'll be big on the copper mine thing. So, but they work in concert with Suntrax, which is a communist organization. So the Indians, they're all about the copper because they can save the trees so they can get more money out of the copper mine. That's what it's really about. Let's just cut through the bullshit, right? It's like, you know, it's about, they're not really ecologists because they wreck their own ecosystems. And then when it's convenient, we'll save the trees so that we can get some money out of the companies. That's what really happens, right? That's what really happens. And so, but they work together. Suntrax. So if Suntrax is publishing about, is protesting big about one thing, you know, and they're on something else, they all come together and protest their different aspects, right? Because they all want concessions or something. And so so tomorrow is, organizations around Panama will be blocking roads, or they say they will. Let's see. And the government says they're going to keep them open. So let's see, because it depends on how big the uprising is. If the uprising is significant, and a lot of Panamanians are clearly not going to join, and a lot of Panamanians I've asked many, and they're like, nope. And others are like, yep, I'll be there, So it depends. And I'll be there as well, which would be actually quite dangerous because you could definitely get killed out here as an American. I went to one about 3 weeks or a month ago by Suntrax, and I predict 90% chance of violence at that one. And that's what Suntrex does. They almost killed a policeman in the protest previous to that. Like, for instance, dropping a brick off of a high building, which was caught on video, actually hit a policeman. And I think it really damaged his arm severely, and others. Anyway, but at the end of the day, there was a lot of arrests. And then I went to the next protest. And then when things were starting to get riled up, even though this is dry season, and I see dark clouds out today, which is weird. This is dry season. Yeah. So, but as soon as the protests were getting riled up, there was lightning and thunder and a big downpour, and it broke the protest. So the 10% won, because I really thought 90% chance of violence. And had it not rained, I would have raised that to 95 after I was on the ground and watching how the mood was going. Keep in mind, I've been in a lot of protests around the world where a lot of people were killed, a lot, right? And so a lot of the protests I've been in end up with bodies on the ground, right? And like dead bodies. And so that's the way this was going, and the rains came. So let's see what happens tomorrow, because I think it'll be violent.
Yeah, and there's always agents provocateurs in any kind of project, protests that go on. There's always antagonists. I mean, George Soros always pays for the buses to make sure they get there.
Yep. And, it looks like India went into his offices. George Soros has been helping Tren de Aragua get through the Darien Gap to the United States. They've been designated as a terrorist organization, right? Up there with Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the rest, right? Straight up terrorist. And George Soros has been helping them get in. That means he finances terrorists. That means United Nations,
yes,
openly, nakedly has done this, provably has done this, right? And we should be going after the United Nations as a sponsor of terrorism. I mean, their camps are still open in Darien. I was just down there.
Can I ask you about that? Yeah, because like last time we spoke about the camps, and there was hundreds of coaches leaving every day, all sponsored and paid for by the United Nations. These people were getting prepaid credit cards, and I even saw the actual convoy of coaches on the way up through to Texas one day when I was driving from Mexico. This is something that's not going away. Has it increased, or has it decreased now that things have changed within the US in regards to immigration policy?
Through the Darien, it's decreased by, I'd say 98%. But the camp, because I was down there looking, right? So it's just like turning the water spigot off. The water spigot's still there, it's still dripping, and the camps are fully manned and being expanded. Keynote, let me repeat, that right now the United States is talking about expanding the camps. I was on the phone with somebody earlier today about that, and they are openly looking at expanding the camps in Darien. They have not gone after United Nations, right? So in other words, the spigot's off right now. Looks cool. Well, hey, Trump's doing great. But why isn't he dismantling these things? He's not going after the United Nations and the United States. The United States is the #1 funder of the United Nations. Full stop. So who's the funder of this? United States. #1 funder of the invasions is the United. Now that blows a lot of people's minds, and they go, well, this can't be true. Therefore, the rest of this is nonsense. I assure you, it is 100% true. It is 100% true. It is amazingly, easily, demonstrably provable. It takes like so little effort. You know what I mean? So little effort. We've been doing this since forever, funding them, right? USAID and all these clowns that are invading and destroying our own country are paid for by the United States.
Yeah.
Full stop, right? So we don't need to blame it on Colombia and Panama and Mexico. It's being done by United States, 100%, right? And then there's other groups that are involved too, like HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, Catholic Charities, Norwegian Refugee Councils, Red Cross, and all these people get money from United States, right? All of them. And United States is helping invade Europe. Who else is helping invade Europe? European Union, 100%. European Union flags are down in the Darien along with U.S. flags. I've published them many times, right? I mean, they paint the flags on the tents and stuff. The flags are everywhere. European Union is openly involved in this. So it's not just United States. United States is just the biggest funder, but the European Union is thickly involved, as is the British government, as is the Scottish government. I've gone to all these countries looking, right? Dutch government, I spent months over there looking. Japanese government's doing it to Japan. And again, people often say, no, Japan would never, no. Yeah, I will say with 100% certainty, the Japanese government is actively involved in invading Japan with Kurdish people and Chinese. Actively, demonstrably, openly, nakedly, right? Not hidden, not conspiracy theory, not in the dark, not in the shadows. It's on podcasts. It's on the press releases. It's on doing, talking in front of the people with the microphone, right? And we go there and look, there's a town in Japan called Kawaguchi. It's filled with Kurds now, Kurds and Chinese. The Japanese call it Kawaguchi-stan. Who's doing it? United Nations. They got a huge university in downtown Tokyo. I was at it last year. I mean, so it's not like this is a global plan. Who's doing this? Who's doing this? Who's actually behind all this?
So the United Nations seem to be the ones facilitating it, but every country that you mentioned there has one common denominator of control, and that seems to be the fact that they all have a central bank basically funding and running everything. Is it going beyond the scale? Is the UN just a tool? And should we be looking further than them to where the money comes from? We say that the US government funds it, but the US government has to get the money from the Federal Reserve, the central banks in every country here. And we have a pretty much good idea of who the people are behind these central banks. And you mentioned that they were pretty much having a stronghold in Panama at the moment. Is this all too coincidental?
Not coincidental. Not coincidental. The Federal Reserve Act was passed in 1913, right? This canal opened in 1914. But if you read the book, where do I got it here? Read the book, The Path Between the Seas, and then read the book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Read those two books. Yeah. I think a lot of people watching your show will have read Creature from Jekyll Island. Yeah. And Creature from Jekyll Island talks about Panama. But if you read Path Between the Seas and Creature from Jekyll Island together, they're both about this big, they're worth it. That's an investment of your time. It is not an expense. You're not wasting one moment of your time. No. If you read The Path Between the Seas and The Creature from Jekyll Island, you will look at this completely differently than you might look at it now, or maybe unless you already have some idea about what's going on. But the Federal Reserve Act, 1913, the canal opens. They're all related, right? I've got another book over here from 1950. Okay. What else started around that time frame? The Great War, World War I, right? All these things, right? Like coincidences, false flag, all these different things going on, right? And I've got a book sitting over here from 1915. It's about the World Expo in San Francisco.
Oh yeah,
and they say in this the book is printed in 1915. I found it in an antique bookstore, and I bought it. And I should have put it beside me on the table, but it talks about, this book it's almost like a CIA fact book for those who are familiar with that. So it's talking about all these different countries like Uruguay, how many cattle they got, the water resources, Brazil, all these different countries. It lists them, and it's got Japanese there and all these. So it gets them all together. It said 19 million people showed up to a city with 1 million people. So 20 million people is what they say from all over the world coming on ships. That's why they had it at San Francisco, so you could get to it. You know what I'm saying? You could go through the Panama Canal and get to it, right? And you can leave when you're done and go down to the Panama Canal and go through it, right? And so this is what it was all about. It was about, let's get together. Now that we've got our canal and the bankers are there, they have this huge expo so that they can get these business people creative juices going around and their capital juices going around the world to say, wait a minute. So Uruguay has this and I'm in Japan. Or I'm in Japan or I'm in Uruguay and Japan has it, or anywhere, Bolivia, all these different countries, and go, shoot, in my town, we need such and such, and they have it in Uruguay. I can put it on a ship and send it over here. And boom, the global economy starts to explode. So it's not just building the path between the seas, the canal, it's then building global commerce. So in that regard, I'm not saying, all the banks are always doing evil. It's just that, they accrued the capital and helped make the canal and that sort of thing, but of course are always going to have to struggle for ultimate control, because that's what money does, right? When you have the gold, the golden rule, right? And so as you accrue more and more gold, like BlackRock can throw down $23 billion for these ports, that's like pocket change. That's like dust. You know what I mean? They'll make that, like tomorrow. You know what I mean? So we're in the trillions world now. We're way out of the mere millions. We're into the billions and hundreds of billions where that gets thrown around readily, right? And so, but back then they had this huge thing and expo in San Francisco in 1915. I got the whole book right here. You should see that. I should have put it here. I'm sorry. And it talks about how to quarantine and all this stuff. It's fascinating. So there's a lot more that happened here. You have to look at the larger. Sorry, I was looking at aircraft. It's not military. It's just going to the airport. It's just like now when I see aircraft go by, I'm like, it's like it's fascinating. So, the Suez Canal, there's 7 major strategic naval choke points, of course. This is one of them, and this is the most important for the United States and for a lot of people, certainly this whole region, right? And then there's the Suez, which, take Gaza, get into a war with Egypt, take Suez, get into a war with, and you need to take out the Houthis to secure the Bab al-Mandeb, which is proving difficult because, they're not giving up, and Strait of Hormuz. If you control the Strait of Hormuz, again, that's this for the Middle East. The Panama is this for us, right? And the Suez, if you have Strait of Hormuz, Bab al-Mandeb, Suez, and Panama Canal, brother, you got some power. You've got some superpowers, right? And the Zionists are clearly going for it. And the Chinese are trying to stop them, and the Russians are trying. Russians definitely don't want us to have the Strait of Hormuz, obviously, because the Russians need to be able to get out and access the sea through Iran there, right? So there was the great game, and now it's an even greater game. It's pretty amazing. It's an amazing time to be alive, actually.
So would you say it's critical that the US now seizes multiple key areas of infrastructure to remain solvent, or is it just all a precursor to expand war for the military-industrial complex?
I think the military-industrial complex is just a subset. That we focus on. That's a subset, right? Like Big Pharma, it's a subset. We look at, Big Pharma. Big Pharma is a subset, right? Big Pharma is very powerful. Big Pharma is this and that and the other. But there's always that larger layer. Like Trump is not in charge. He's a condom for much, much bigger, more powerful people. And, he'll be gone within 3.5 years or so, right? His power is now starting to, it'll stay pretty high for the next couple of years, and then it's going to start to diminish, right? Mm-hmm. And then in 4 years, he's gone. He's a leaf that's fallen off the tree. He no longer matters, period, right? And so, and he won't, nobody will miss him. The world will keep turning, right? And keep in mind, he's part of a larger game of which Biden was a part, of which Governor Abbott in Texas and so many others are a part. Trudeau, Rutte in Netherlands, right? All these different people that are actually part of that system are a part of that. That's one of the reasons they hate Putin. He's not a part. He's not playing their game. He's not their boy, right? And they want to take him out because he's not their boy, right? Trump is their boy. Biden was whatever he was. He's something you step on the sidewalk, but he's their boy. Biden is the most ultimately corrupt guy in the world. He's like, mice, money, ideology, coercion, ego. Those are the 4 main cheeses that you recruit people with. Trump is obviously all about money and coercion and ego, right? They probably got a lot to coerce him with, and ego. Seriously, and money. So he's bookended on that. He's like a perfect, easily recruitable guy, right? And Biden, he's all over he's money, ego. They probably got enough to put him and his son in jail for 500 years, but I don't know. But some of the people, I think Putin's he's not gonna fall for the coercion, unless you've got like atomic level coercion, right? And he's one of the richest guys in the world. What money have you got for him? Ego, I mean, he's clearly psychologically stable. He doesn't need somebody petting him all the time. Oh, you're a good monkey, monkey good. You know, that's what Trump is. Monkey good monkey. You know what I mean? He has to be flagellated. So, and he needs money and ego. So just make him feel like he's in charge, and he is in some level charge because the actor gets to ad lib and do these sort of things. But the moment he's doing something that they don't really like, they'll take him out, right? And they, you know, the people that there's a organizational structure organizational structures that is very difficult to describe and get your arms wrapped around. I was down here in Panama with Brett Weinstein, who's an evolutionary biologist. He did his PhD work here in Panama, a brilliant guy. And he asked me something like, well, who runs this thing that I was describing? And I said, I don't know. I mean, but who runs the jungle? I don't know. I know the jungle is here. I know there's crocodiles and mosquitoes and stuff. You know what I mean? I know that they're here, right? And I don't think the mosquitoes get together at night and make a game plan on how to attack you. I think it's just sort of a firmware sensor thing. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? They're like the Taliban. You know what I mean? They just kind of wherever you're at, they'll fight you there. And if you walk over there, they'll fight you over there. If you walk further, most of the mosquitoes that bite you here, or not bite you, but suck your blood here, you know, one of the major types that cause so much disease here, they rarely travel more than 1,000 feet from where they come from, where they were, you know, generated from, you know. And if you call it born, what happens to mosquitoes? And so likewise with who's running the system, you know, one very wise man told me one time, he was a retired Army colonel named Alfred Johnson Sr. I used to talk with him for hours on end, and he's passed away. God rest his soul. Brilliant. He told me one time during one of our long conversations, he said, organizational structure dictates outcome, right? Like, how does the watch work? All the little gears and stuff. You know, most of the people are gears. Most of us, like working Border Patrol or whatever, in the Army or whatever, you're a gear and your job is to click to the right and get paid, click to the right and get paid, or click to the left or be the spring or whatever, right? You're part of an organizational structure. My job is not to ask why, but to do or die. I will be a good gear, right? And so they're gears inside of a clock. They don't even know they're in a clock, and they don't know what time it is, right? That's the most people. They're not bad. They're not good or bad. They're humans. They're like us. Some are very good. Some are very bad. Most of us have a propensity for both, right? And so, but they are put into an organizational structure that is a psychopath, because all organizational structures end up becoming a psychopath. One brilliant man that I've read a dozen of his books, he's one of the most intense American trial lawyers in American history, named Jerry Spence. And I read his books years and years ago. And because I've always been interested in justice and that sort of thing. But he's also an artist, right? He's not just a lawyer. He's one of those guys that brought the art of fighting in the courtroom to the art of war. You know what I mean? And like, it's unbelievable, dude. But he talked about, he didn't use the terms organizational structure, as I recall, but that's what he described. Once you create these organizational structures like BlackRock or whatever, if the top people are all gone, it doesn't matter. They'll be replaced. Army, 1,000 people get killed in the Army, 100,000 people get killed in the Army. Other people backfill and stay within that organizational structure. You fill out these papers. You fill out that. I read a book on leprosy colony in Molokai in Hawaii. It's an old book, and it talked about how once you got on the list, who talked about lists? Kipling, right? Once you get on the list, like some people would get on this list of, you got to go to the quarantine to the leper colony. And once you're on that list, the organizational structure hunts you down, because the list goes to the sheriff and it goes to all these people. And so there were people that got on the list, and these aren't computer lists. This is old days stuff, right? So somehow there were people that got on the list and nobody knows how they got on there. just like today. Like, how'd you get in the computer, right? And sometimes it appears to be maybe name misspelling or maybe revenge or a business thing or something. Maybe somebody just, wrote down the wrong name. And the next thing you know, you're getting hunted down. You're living in the jungle because you can't go home. There were people in this book that are like living out in the jungle for years because they don't want to go to the leper colony. And they're like, how did I get on the list? I never even went to the doctor. And somehow I'm on this list. And and the sheriff, like one guy got in a shootout with the sheriff. I think he killed the sheriff actually. And sheriff killed others, and you got on the organizational structure. And we have that now. And now with all this AI and this information centers are building in places like Memphis. I mean, imagine the organizational structure that they can put our information in this interview. The most dangerous thing we can do is communicate now by electronic means. It's incredibly, and we've done it. Our life patterns are very well known at this point. Everybody pretty much that uses a smartphone, you are very well known, very well known. It doesn't matter how much, if you're carrying that phone around, you are very well known. There's no, if somebody says, well, I got this phone, it's very secure, they're lying. They are lying, or they don't know what they're talking about. One or the other, or both. It could be both. There is no such thing as a secure phone. Burner phones, bullshit. Burner phones are some of the best phones for trackability, by the way. Probably didn't know that. Most people probably didn't. But, the bottom line is the thing is, it's not just you, it's your family. Maybe you're very secure, but your family's not. Because all around us, people, all these cameras everywhere, they're all increasingly feeding into common databases, right? Credit card, everything, right? All watching this. So this organizational structure that can come and then all of a sudden, boom, the AI goes, risk, off. Yeah. Now you're on the list. And now you're on the list, your passport gets canceled, you get picked up by the next cop that sees your license tag because, they have cameras on cars in a lot of states and boom, arrest him, right? For what? Because you're on the list. It's that simple. And robots, right? Drone, track him down, right? Tesla car, report to the nearest police station. You're in your Tesla, doors locked, it drives you off to the prison, right? Yeah. It's that simple, right? All these Tesla cars with cameras 360 all around them, those are unbelievable spy platforms. That's not just for feeling its way down the road. That's for watching everywhere a Tesla's parked and driving. Everywhere is being watched now and fed into. They're building this. You see what they're doing. This huge data center in Memphis, as an example. A friend that you might want to interview, Al Johnson. He was just down here with me in Panama. It was his father I was talking about earlier, the wise man that talked about. And Al Johnson himself was an Army officer. We worked together on all kinds of things. We've been all over the world together looking at these things. And he was just up in Memphis researching that data center, right? He was just down here researching this component. So these are different components. So military industrial complex, that is a huge subcomponent, right? Pharma, huge subcomponent, and they all obviously overlap, right? Media, it's just the media, all these, you got to keep in mind, like somebody like Joe Rogan, the druggy guy that pushes drugs on a show and comes on drunk and whatnot. He's a clear weapon against us, doing his drugs and his alcohol in front of millions of young people, right? That's clear weaponization. Now, people say, why don't you go on a show? He's got such a big show. And I'm like, no. Because then whatever I bring to the show, he's going to be advertising alcohol to him and all these drugs, which is a primary weapon. It's a primary weapon of psychological operations, is all forms of intoxicants. This has been known through space and time and used, right? And I could go on for hours about that, but that's a sidetrack. But how much does somebody like Doper Joe Rogan cost? I don't know. Just pick a number. Let's pick a big number. Let's say he costs $50 million a year, right? Which is probably not that much, but let's just say 50. Yep. Let's say he's making $1 million a week, right? Let's say $52 million a year, right? That's nothing. That's pocket lint. That's nothing. And he gets all of for the advertisement that he's bringing in and the attacks he's doing on America, getting the idiot Elon Musk up there, who people think is in charge of all this stuff. He's a druggie. Elon Musk pushed the death jabs. He pushed them. The science is unequivocal, he said. All right, so I'm really going to take dope advice on jabs from somebody who's high, right? From somebody, I'm going to put a neuro link in my head from somebody who openly talks about his ketamine problems, right? And ketamine, the date rape drug, all that stuff, right? I mean, he's on him. He talks about him in the open, right? And so do you think that this guy is really doing all this stuff? SpaceX, I've been to SpaceX probably 50 times. I don't know, a lot, right? I spent a lot of time over there just because that's one of the invasion routes over Boca Chica by the Mexico border, right? Mouth of the Rio Grande, right? And so do you think he's really doing all this stuff? Somebody who's, had to get dried out. Well, Larry Ellison apparently helped them get dried out. You know what I mean? This guys like that are, we've all known dopers, and they may have been high functioning for a while, but they diminish, they go down. And part of the big brainwashing is of the psychological operations is, hey, you're being free by doing your dope. You're fighting for freedom. No, you're actually doing the opposite. And you're high. And they're like, yeah, but I see things that you don't see. And I'm sure you do. And they're talking about, the natives used to use this and that and the other so they could see things. I'm like, the natives live in grass huts and still do. In fact, I'm out in those huts all the time, right? All over the world, right? And so I'm sure it's fun. I'm sure it's fun living out there and not having running water. But so I don't want to hear it. I know what it's about. Like right now, Thailand is under serious attack on the dope thing. And the serious dopers who get really emotional about this, they will defend their bong, but they won't defend our border. And then they'll start arguing with you about the minutia of like, you don't even know what dope is, and that's not what that means, and But inevitably, these brain dead people, they don't know what they're talking about. Rarely do. They'll talk about, well, dope is actually X, Y, and Z. You're calling opium dope. Dope is actually marijuana. It's like, okay, go back to school, stop with the bong, and pick up some books. Opium was called dope long before you were born. You know what I mean? It was long before anybody watching this was born. They were calling opium dope and still do, right? So they were also calling cocaine dope long before the oldest person watching this was born. They were calling cocaine dope. They were calling opium dope, right? And one doctor, I found something that he wrote, it was an op-ed in 1920, I think it was. He was talking about the most dangerous thing that he saw, and he was talking about dope. He's talking about cocaine and opium and all this. He said one of the most dangerous that really affects children a lot, unborn children. And he said he had been a doctor for 40 years, as I recall. I published this on Substack maybe a month or two ago. And he talked about how tobacco actually seemed to have some effect on unborn children. He said the children of mothers who smoke they're like more irritable, and they're more susceptible as they get older to going into the alcohol and that sort of thing. I don't know if it's true, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But he went on about that. It was a very long op-ed. It was actually quite interesting. I found one book from maybe it was 1889 or something, and it was about smallpox vaccine by a British doctor, right? British doctor. You can find it online. It's called Smallpox. Maybe just look up smallpox vaccine 1889 and you might be able to find it. And you can probably download it, but I found it somewhere and I read it, I don't know, 4 years ago or so. And this British doctor, he's talking about how dangerous the smallpox vaccine is, right? And he's like, he goes through page after page, he's doing the math and everything, and he's making a case why this is bullshit, and he's made and I'm like, what's most interesting about these books and so many older books that I read are that they could have been written this morning. All you need to do is change the names and the dates. Everything he wrote could have been written literally during the big jab fest that was going on and continues to go on, right? Just change the names and dates. And that British doctor was I can look it up here real quick because I got it in my I read it, so I have it right here. Do you read old books on things like this? All these old things are all the same.
Yeah, I have a nice collection of old books, and when it's my birthday or Christmas, the family don't seem to know what to buy me. And they'll always end up in one of these little old stores, and then they'll come back with some old books. I think it was for my birthday or Christmas. I got a real old section of books on the history of the Roman Empire recently, so that was kind of interesting. And I've even got stuff. I think it's the old Mackay's encyclopedias for the Masonic lodges as well. And those are beautifully illustrated old books, even old atlases and things that talk about the history of the world within them as well. Anything like that fascinates me, and if I can ever get my hands on things like that, even if I don't think I'm going to read them immediately, I'll bring them home with me. And yeah, I've probably had to get rid of more books over the years when we've moved house or moved country because I couldn't take them
Well,
all.
if they're old ones, tell me what they are. Maybe I'll take them off your hands.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've got one there at the moment. I think it's a 1906 book called The Phantom of the Poles. And that's interesting because it talks about the planet and the openings at either end of the North and the South Pole. And considering how old this book is and when it was written, you've got to wonder, it's probably a little bit more than just a conspiracy theory. And when you start linking it into other things, I mean, I even like collecting like the old National Geographics with Admiral Byrd's missions and things like that in, because it gives you the ability to capture time and see it in a completely different way that the internet will put it out in this day and age. I mean, the internet is nothing more than a modern day book burning, in my opinion.
Oh, huge. It is. It is. Because now you can buy books on Amazon, which I've done, Kindle books, but they rewrite them. Like while it's sitting on your, I found the book. In fact, it was entered into this one has a stamp on it, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And it was stamped in like with a stamp on December 29th, 1951, or 29 December 1950. And the title of the book is Vaccination Proved Useless and Dangerous from 45 Years of Registration Statistics. The doctor's name is, or say it's a doctor, is Alfred R. Wallace, of course, Wallace. Alfred R. Wallace, LLD. What's LLD? And I think the book's from 1889. Here we go. Here it is. 1889 on the next
Yeah.
page. So it's 1889, and he starts going off at 45 years. So he's writing a book in 1889 based on what he says is 45 years of statistics. And
Yeah.
this book is to the members of parliament and others. It's and it's well written. You know how the old timers, you know
Oh, yeah.
what? You know the way British, here it is, 45 years of statistics, 45 years of registration statistics, smallpox mortality and vaccination. Having been led to inquire for myself as to the effects of vaccination in preventing or diminishing smallpox, I have arrived at results as unexpected as they appear to me to be conclusive. The question is one of which affects our personal liberty as well as the health and even the lives of thousands. It therefore becomes a duty to endeavor to make the truth known to all, and especially to those who, on the faith of false or misleading statements, have enforced the practice of vaccination by penal laws. That's 1889. That's his opening, really long sentence
Yeah.
paragraph.
And
Man, what a
history
great
is
sentence,
repeating
too, that
itself,
is.
hasn't it? This has just continued time after time, the same playbook, just in a modern era.
Yeah. You know what? By the way, you guys put commas in different places than Americans. And years ago, as a writer, I'm like, why don't I properly know how to use commas? I can do, some good math. I did years of calculus and all this stuff, and I can write, okay. But I was having a problem figuring out where to put commas sometimes, and then I figured out why. It's because British put commas in different places. And I read a lot of your old books. So commas have evolved over time. British use them slightly differently than Americans, and Americans and British have changed the way we use commas over time. And since I was very young, I was always reading old stuff and new stuff. And I'm like, why are they putting a comma here? It's like, and So finally, I was like, okay, I found a book on how to use commas, right? So, and that was when the book described how the confusion actually comes on the use of commas. Because I learn a lot by just reading from super duper people who happen to use the punctuation differently than each other.
Yeah, well, the English are well known for making the commas blend in, so you can't see them. It's a well known term that it's a comma chameleon.
Just make the comma blend in so you don't see it. One way that I worked the way around commas is I started writing sentences that didn't need them.
Yeah.
I was like, well, this will fix that problem. I'll write like Ernest Hemingway, throw those commas out the window.
So let's get back to what we were talking about a little earlier about you were saying about obviously the strategic positioning of the ports and that people can hold them. But what we're seeing, obviously, Trump was making again big noise about taking Canada and Greenland. Is it critical that the US now seizes multiple key areas of infrastructure around the world, not only to remain solvent, but also to have that strategic advantage as what looks like a war with China will escalate? Are they going to need as many allies and as many resources as possible, literally from Greenland all the way down through to Panama?
Yeah. I mean, you just picked up those books on the Romans. Once you start reading those, you pretty much know how this is going to unfold.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the Romans, man. It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. It's just different names and different technologies and stuff, but it's the same dance. Same dance, different shoes, right? And so we need as many allies as we can get. But what I've clearly seen, and I've started writing about this about 10 years ago, I think about 2014 is when it became obvious to me, is that there are elements in our government that are trying to destroy our relations with countries like Thailand and Japan. They're like openly sabotaging our relationships. And in Thailand, I got in a huge fight with the U.S. ambassador, Christy Kinney, not together, but we were like, I was going after her a lot in writing, and she left Bangkok early, actually. She was clearly sabotaging at first I'm like, is she just the stupidest lady in the world? And then over time, I'm like, well, she is stupid, but she's clearly sabotaging because I see others doing, when you look at you need to always look at the largest fact pattern that you can. And that means historically and contemporaneously, right? And looking at the fact pattern in different countries like India, Japan, and here in Panama, clearly there are elements of our government who are trying to destroy our relations with our longtime allies.
Yeah.
You can see our relations with United Kingdom are eroding. You can see our relations with Germany and all of Europe, right, is eroding. And when Europeans are like, why are Americans doing this? I'm like, so that you and me will fight. Bottom line, yeah, so that you and I will fight, and because it's a divide and conquer, right? And who wants to divide and conquer? Who wants to do that?
Oh,
why would the United States want to do that when the United States has, for our history, typically tried to unite others with us? Because one of our major sources of power is soft power, right?
Yeah.
So you have to attack that soft power, the soft power of saying, well, we're going to do it, so why don't you do it with us? And they're like, okay, or we're not going to do that, so why don't you not do it with us? And they're like, okay, right? Like the king of Thailand, King Rama the Ninth, God bless him, he's gone. He's like one of the only kings I really liked. But one of the things that he was all about was soft power, right? He was all about, like, we're fighting opium, for instance, that the Chinese and other communists were bringing to Thailand heavily. He's like, we will help you not grow opium. We'll help you by helping you grow flowers and coffee. That's why Thailand grows so much coffee, is because of all this, and flowers. It's because of all this, right? We will help you. And then he had such moral authority that he would say, we're not going to grow opium because we're Thai, and Thais should not grow opium because it's just morally wrong. And a lot of people are like, okay, we won't do it because the king says it's morally wrong, and it's un-Thai to grow opium or to grow poppy to make opium. So that stopped a lot of people. And for the others who didn't stop, the next phase was, and even the ones who did, is we'll help you grow flour and flowers and coffee and all kinds of other stuff, because they studied the minutia of Thailand and where stuff grows the best and that sort of thing. And he built roads for them, and it's pretty amazing. And then for the final ones that really wanted to hold out, he sent the army and, went to war with them, like kinetic, right? And that's where, and eventually beat them down enough that they were beat down. But now I see drugs spreading over Thailand real thick. And there's thousands of cannabis stores now. And of course, the cannabis monkeys are like, hey, you're against cannabis and blah, 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 blah. It's like, but the bottom line is that is what will be. I was just down in Argentina looking at the same, right? I went to a cannabis expo in Buenos Aires about 4 or 5 months ago, I think November. And that is not just about your freedom. It's not about freedom. It's about dumbing you down, which is highly effective, and slowing you down and making you lay on the couch instead of actually defending your country. Ireland, look what's happening to Ireland.
Yeah.
Ireland, I went to Ireland with Masako Ganaha. Look what's happening to United Kingdom. And, Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, all these things, right? Netherlands, Luxembourg is gone, Sweden gone. The only ones that aren't really gone are the ones that have really held out on, for instance, the weaponized migration, quote unquote. And that would be like Poland and Hungary, right? But a problem with Poland and Hungary, let's say Hungary, you're the last holdout, right? And I spent more than 6 years in Europe, so I'm kind of familiar with the thing. I lived in Poland a couple of years. Ich spreche Deutsch, eigentlich, ich kann Deutsch. I speak German. And so I lived in Germany for about 4 years. And but let's say Hungary holds out and doesn't let them in. But now they are overwhelmed because all the neighbors have done it. Yeah. I mean, all the neighbors. I mean, it's like the Chinese strategy. We will become you. The Chinese aren't the only ones doing it, but I mean, there's this weaponized migration. Weapons of intoxicants are the grease and fuel of psychological operations, intoxicants, and have been for, I don't know when it started. And all the old books a lot of the old war things, it'll be like, and the Chinese, when we overran their position, we found opium pipes, the commander had, and, killed them and found them with their opium pipes and stuff. But anyway, at the end of the day, I could go on for hours about this, so I don't want to burn your time.
You as well. I mean, with you being a reporter and a photographer, certainly out in all the war zones, when you were out in Afghanistan and Middle East wars, I always heard rumors that the military themselves, there was huge growing operations of heroin, and these were being bundled up and actually flown back in military aircraft to military bases in the US, pretty much like a black ops. Again, not only for the revenue side and the money side of it, but for deliberate destruction of society within it. Did you ever capture anything in Afghanistan going on like that? Because I know that they were burning poppy fields and things like that. But once the Taliban were out there and they were removed from the situation, was there any evidence that you ever captured to prove this?
Now, I was there for 2 years, and I photographed poppy a lot. I saw a lot of opium burned, not a lot, but quite a few times burning it. It wasn't like tons that I would see them burn. It would be like, sometimes it would be 10 pounds or 100 pounds, or one day it was maybe a few 100 pounds. And I photographed that, and I think I published it. Now, at the time, there were Afghans, like one tribal leader, his name's Ajmal Khan. He was telling me, he's like, Americans are loading this on the airplanes and sending it back. And his English is perfect. And I was like, I didn't believe him. I just didn't. At that point, I still didn't quite realize how bad we were. I didn't realize it. But now, opium or poppy was growing like Wizard of Oz levels around the bases, like British and American bases, like right there, like literally stone's throw from the walls, right? Like literally, not figuratively, like you could spit on the poppy growing next to our perimeter in some places, in Helmand, for instance. Yeah, it was really wild. And I was out in Sangin, of course, with the British, which was the most dangerous district in all of about 400 districts in Afghanistan. It was the most dangerous. I went out with the British there, opium everywhere, man. And it was unbelievable. In some places, like in Uruzgan, it was like Wizard of Oz, undulating hills, and beautiful, actually. But it's just amazing. And I'm like, why are we letting this happen? And I asked British commanders, American commanders, are like, well, what's their, how are they going to feed themselves? I'm like, 90, I think 92 or 93% of the opium that's said to be coming from, that's in Europe is said to be coming from here. I don't know if it's true, but I can tell you one thing, they're making a lot. And it was really a lot, and we're only burning a little bit. And then they would do these photo ops where British or American forces and Lithuanians as well. I was out with them. They would go out and smack down, or the people that would smack it down would always be Afghans. They would smack it down with the poles and take some photos and say, hey, the poppy eradication. So basically, they would literally pay some farmer like, hey, we're going to come smash your field down, and here's what you would have gotten for that opium. He's like, oh, that's a good deal. I don't have to harvest it. So, and then they would go do the photo ops, and you have to ask yourself. So I wrote a series of dispatches in 2006 called The Perfect Evil. It was about 12 dispatches, and I talked about some of this, but I wasn't as enlightened back then that we were actually smuggling it back to ourselves. I thought it was still smugglers doing it. But if you just then add the realization that actually our governments are doing it, now I don't have any proof that our governments are doing it. I was never at a C-17 or something like that where they were loading it up. I never was, right? I was told by somebody who works at Department of Homeland Security in the United States, who was actually, and I know him. I mean, he talked about how he was actually with orders smuggling drugs across the U.S. border into the United States with the department, not him as a drug smuggler, but the department was doing it, right? He was helping make sure that it got through. And I was like, why are you guys doing that? He goes, well, because we can track down where it's going. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Based on all the other things that I was seeing, I'm like, that something's. I told him, I was like, that doesn't sound right. I mean,
yeah, it's crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Israel. Israel really needs a war. Obviously, the peace talks are off the table now, and they need a war to expand its Greater Israel project. And I'm sure that Donald Trump would like a nice beachfront hotel in Gaza. But what do you really think of the possibility of October the 7th being an inside job?
What do I think of the possibility? I was probably one of the first people saying it. I mean, almost instantly. Yeah. I mean, because, I did do a lot of combat, and I've ridden in Blackhawks a lot in combat, right? And I know how long it takes to get a cold, let's say you got a QRF, quick reaction force, right?
Yeah.
Different helicopters take different lengths of time to get off the ground. Like a Apache takes longer. Ask the Apache people, I've forgotten. But a Blackhawk is, made so you can, get that thing going real quick. All military helicopters, you want them to be able to get going quickly. But, it takes some time to get everything, all their pressures up and whatever goes on inside those incredible machines. But a Blackhawk, like I was embedded with a helicopter unit in Iraq, and they would sit here and watch TV or whatever, and the alarm goes off, they run out to the helicopters, right? And and some of those helicopters were too small. I couldn't go in them. They were Kiowa Warriors and that sort of thing. So I would watch their attacks from the headquarters and watch the videos actually from the live, right? And actually sometimes the alarm would come on. I'd be like, see you, be careful. And I'll be watching you. And, and I would just be in there in the headquarters, which is like 20 feet away, 8 feet away, and watch the, screens with the drones up or whatever, and watching them. And sometimes they were attacking so close, I would hear the missiles and hear the machine guns and all that stuff. I mean, the attacks would be often quite close, right? And then I was embedded with in Afghanistan with Pedros, which is U.S. Air Force, incredible search and rescue people, unbelievable. And they can get their special Blackhawks. They're much more special, but they could get those off the ground in 4 minutes, right? And these are special operations guys, but let's just say you don't practice very much, so 6 minutes, and you're a slow guy. And they travel 180 knots, and Israel's not very big. So why did it take 7 or 8 hours to get any serious firepower on the ground there to fight back? And because you should have been off the ground, because your QRF should be waiting right there. The alarm goes off, and this is how it goes. I'll show you how the dance goes. They're sitting here, literally reading books, or some of them play those stupid video games, and but others, doing whatever they're doing, talking to their wife. Beep beep beep. Alarm goes off. Everybody throws their body armor on while the helicopter pilots are running out. I was with different units. Some were just attack helicopters. That was like Iraq. But then when I'm with the medevac guys over in Afghanistan, the pilots, they're out there quick. Everything's cranking up. Everybody else is getting their gear. Everything's going, and I jump on and we take off. 4 minutes later, wheels up. 5 minutes will be a slow start. People will be really upset about that. So, I mean, I've been on QRFs, right? So it's like 5 minutes later, we're actually going at some rate of speed, right? So when I am like, there's something wrong with this, it's not just randomly talk. They go 180 knots approximately, right? And Israel's small, so they should have been in combat within 20, 30 minutes maximum, probably 20, 25 minutes, something like that. Well, let's say 30 minutes because they're super slow and whatever. But the guys that were closer on the ground, they should have been driving. If you're on foot, jump on a freaking bicycle, man. If they're shooting your people, I mean, seriously, get your rifle and go get into combat, right? I mean, get between the enemy and your people. If you get killed, then you get killed. Soldiers, you know what I'm saying? They're killing our people, right? We're going to come and enter the gunfight. We're going to join battle as quickly as possible, right? Here's the plan. Go find who's shooting and shoot them, right? A lot of people have gotten angry. They're like, no, they have to form a plan. I'm like, you're not even get away from the table. You don't know anything about combat, and you don't know anything about special operations forces. If they're shooting your people, wheels up, get in there, find where they're shooting, shoot them from the sky, shoot them as much as you can, drop your guys off, keep shooting from the sky, go get more gas, go get more guys, whatever. Keep bringing them in, bringing them in, bringing them in. You should have had half the army there in 7 or 8 hours. That's bullshit that it took that long to get into combat. The best intelligence in the world, the best military in the world. Yeah, right. Okay, so that was clearly a staked goat and a green flagged attack, right? Not false flag. False flag is where you actually do it, right? A green flag is more like Pearl Harbor. We knew they were going to attack. Unequivocally, we knew they were going to attack, and we let them do it, right? That's a green flag, right? A staked goat attack is where and this is an old tactic that's been used through space and time, put small units of U.S. military up on the North Korean border, tripwire. So if they come across and kill our guys, hey, you killed Americans, come in, start dumping people out of America, because the American emotions will be high and they'll probably support it, right? Afghans used to do stuff like this. They would literally stake a woman to a stake. That's why they call it staked, or staked goat is a way of hunting. Actually, you stake a goat, wait for the tiger. The Embarra do that with pigs down the Darien Gap to one jaguar hunter. He told me how he got this jaguar that he had there, and he staked the pig, right? So they staked that staked goat in Israel was the party, right? They weren't supposed to have it there, and everybody's like, "Why are you having a party here? This is unbelievably dangerous, right?" And because it was a staked goat attack, right? And then it was green flag. They let them attack to get everybody all riled up, and now Trump's like, "Release the prisoners." It's all part of a show. It's a movie. It's a movie. It's made for television. And now you see Conor McGregor. Hey, we're gonna, you're gonna have to do something. And it was my team, Burning Edge, that set conditions for Trump to do that thing with Conor McGregor yesterday. I've never talked with Conor McGregor. I've never been involved with him at whatever. But we went to Ireland and we've been pushing it hard at upper levels in the US, like Ireland's getting destroyed, right? And because, you know, there's a lot of people with Irish descent in the US government. So I thought that'll get their attention. Started focusing on Ireland, right? Like, you know, like they're destroying your birthplace of your grandparents, right? Look, I mean, it's our money and their money too. I mean, I was out talking with Mary Lou McDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin. She's got an IQ that's, you know, lower than the temperature of this room. And, you know, and she's like all about letting the people invade, right? And so
yeah, gone are the days of Jerry Adams.
yeah. But when it comes to Israel, that was clearly staked goat. That was clearly casus belli, cause for war, so they can take Gaza, take that gas, eventually take Suez in the greater Israel project, and to build Ben Gurion Canal, and to open the Indo-European corridor through Israel and Gaza and Haifa, and clear Bab el-Mandeb. That means they're going to want to have to take Djibouti at some point somehow. I don't know how they're going to pull that off. And then Iran, Strait of Hormuz. Think about that one. Then you've got
always the goal, wasn't it? I mean,
what's that?
You look back at General Wesley Clark when he was stating the countries that were going to fall to American military. You know, Iran was on the list, and it always has been. And they've always, whether it's, you know, telling that they can't have nuclear power, or, you know, if it's some kind of an Iranian attack on an embassy, they've always been doing something to kind of make Iran look like it's always going to be the target. I think it eventually will be.
Yeah, you know, I first started realizing this in about 2006, something like that. I met with the Israeli ambassador and a bunch of other very powerful and influential people. And then I was invited to Israel, and I went. There was a private thing going on with Netanyahu in small room and stuff. And everybody is always trying to Iran. Like Iran's this, Iran's that. And I'm just like, I don't see it. I mean, I'm not saying that they're, you know, that it's a place that I want to buy a summer home, but I'm just not seeing it. It's like, I don't wake up in the morning when I meet Iranians, I don't feel like I'm under threat. You know what I mean? And if I say something bad about Iranians, I don't get death threats and debanked, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just don't see it. But then over time, I'm like, oh, this is clearly the Zionists that want to attack Iran. Yeah. Now, some people put that backwards in their paradigm. Their Rorschach is different. They see it as America using Zionist instead of Zionist using America. I think they've grown together, and they're not separate. They're like, Trump is openly Zionist, right? And so his whole ecosystem is openly Zionist, right? And so the energy over time, the Zionists have, you know, been basically the fungus that's got inside of the brain and gets the ants to do what it wants. It's interesting too, because the Chinese clearly are studying the Zionists. Like, anthropological warfare is a very real thing, right? Yeah. And on many things, I would overlap in agreement with Zionists on many things. Like, I like pushing back on China, you know, but death jabs, you lost me on that one. You know what I mean? That was, I was an Israel supporter until the death jabs, and that woke up a lot of things. Yeah. And then I just like, I was naive, actually. I didn't actually recognize this. We're like within a concentric series of IMAX movies almost. You keep cutting yourself out and going, okay, now I see how this works. And then the next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute, here's another zipper, and I'm out of that IMAX movie. You start to see, right? And so it's not like anybody. I think there's no actual person that you would find on Earth who actually understands exactly what's happening. You have to try to understand this in the way that somebody would more like understand climate, right? Except it's the climate of firmwares and beliefs and the way humans interact with each other and that sort of thing. Because I think the only way you're going to really be predictive is like my predictions on Panama have been more not based on who's president or any of that stuff. It's more based on This is a big, juicy lamb with a garland of pork chops around its neck.
Yeah.
It's defenseless. And somebody's going to take it because
Yeah.
that's how this goes. Because the world has huge predators, of which one is my country. Although I still think we have some amazingly great sides to the United States, I'm still American to the core. But as you get older and you see more things, you start to go, we're like one of those Hindu gods with a bunch of faces. There's one face that's incredibly generous and very giving and just very solidly good. And there's another that's absolutely greedy and psychopathic. You know what I mean? And which face are you going to get today? You know what I'm saying? Because we're not a monolith. There's different energy centers within the United States, just like there are in the UK and across Europe and China. China's not a monolith. There's people in China that would overthrow Xi if they can get enough, influence to do it. Of course, he needs all the smart cities and whatnot to have perpetual control, passed on.
Yeah.
Anyway, we could go for hours.
Yeah, no, you being American military, Green Beret, and based upon you exposing China for what they're doing, have they put any bans on you entering the country or traveling there?
They kicked me out of Hong Kong. Now, before I was talking bad about China, I had been to China quite a lot. I'd spent maybe a year in and around China. That would be like Xi'an and Beijing and Shanghai, places like that. Tibet, I went to Tibet. And so that was years ago when I went to Tibet. So I've been to China quite a few times. But then in 2020, they kicked me out of Hong Kong. I mean, I guess they'd seen enough of you know, I didn't talk bad about them because I didn't realize how badly they were behaving until I started spending time a year in Nepal, and I was up in Bhutan and all these different places. And I'm watching what they're doing, Taiwan. I'm watching, then I started realizing, wait a minute, a lot of the drugs that have been coming to Thailand actually are coming from China. And, they're always claiming to be the victim of the British. And so therefore we can do anything we want. And, beware of professional victims. Professional victims are always predators. I've never seen an exception to that, whether it's on a personal scale, like one person, like, they're always doing bad to me. That person's going to stab you in the back 100%. Or if it's a culture or a tribe, right? Let's say a tribe or a larger culture that's consists of many tribes, right? They can be, professional victims, and they're going to stab you because like you talk with gypsies, for instance. Why do gypsies steal so much, right? And people say that they're like, "You're racist." I'm like, "Am I? What race is a gypsy?" Okay, all right, have fun with that. As somebody who lives around the world in all these different countries, I'm going to say it. Gypsies are thieves. Gypsies, tramps, and thieves. So if you look up or if you talk with gypsies, which I've done quite a lot, and you ask them, why do you steal so much? Just ask them straight up. Keep in mind, they can go to the knife real quick too, but they as part of their firmware, their cultural belief, there's different tellings of this story, but basically when Christ was being crucified, a gypsy tinkerer stole one of the nails to repair his wagon, a golden nail apparently, and that's why there's only 3 nails in Christ, they say, right? So they're like, so we have a right to steal based on that somehow. That extrapolates to. So I mean, it's part of the actual firmware, right? So if your firmware, your base belief system is one that I can't do any wrong because God gave me the right to, dominion over all the animals, and that includes all the other tribes, right? And that includes anybody that will actually fall for my tricks, right? And so that's how a lot of these firmwares work. A lot of Americans are about to be in for a terrible surprise. And Europeans too. They already are. Jose Ibarra, who killed Laken Riley, President Trump talked about her in a speech. Her killer came through the Darien Gap. I know what bus he got on, right? His brothers came through the Darien Gap together. I know what bus they got on together, right? We know a lot about these guys. We know there's huge amounts of Hamas and others who've come through the Darien Gap. Unbelievable. There's like more than 25,000 Chinese alone came through in 2023 alone, just in 1 year. Just in 1 year, more than 500,000 people came through the Darien Gap in 1 year. That's just the Darien Gap flow. And more than 25,000 of those were Chinese. A huge amount others were, I could tell you the exact numbers, but a huge amount more were Venezuelans and from about 150 countries, right? And all these, some fish don't mix well in the same aquarium. And this is demographic destruction. It's a WMD. And how did they get to the point where British men, German men, Dutch, Irish, who's always like fighting Irish, will never happen here. I'm like, I went to Ireland. I was down giving a talk down in Argentina in Buenos Aires some months ago, and Ivor Cummins was there because he was giving a speech too. And I started talking about Ireland. And everybody's, in the crowd, they're like, they were kind of joking with Ivor because Ivor didn't quite see it. He didn't quite realize what was going on in Ireland. And so we went out to dinner together. He's super smart. And so I think we went together dinner a couple times. And so then he went back to Ireland. I said, listen, they are clearly taking Ireland. You asked me the reason why, and I don't know. It's clear. I mean, like specifically why Ireland? They're taking all of Europe and the United States and a lot of other places, New Zealand and Australia and more and more and more, right? They're taking a lot. It's not just Ireland. So it could, you're just part of it. You're also where a lot of communication cables land. You're also an ideal military base to control it'd be an ideal military base. It's ideal for a lot of things if they get rid of you, if they get rid of the Irish. And that's why I keep telling these Panamanians, they want Panama. They specifically don't want you, right? And in the same thing with the United States, they want the farmland. They don't want American farmers, right? The globalists, like BlackRock taking the ports. Yeah. Larry Fink, he's open that he wants to continue the invasion. He said it like 6 days ago, maybe 7 days ago on a video. You can see him. He's talking about it. He wants to continue it. So the guy, if they get the ports here on either side of the Panama Canal, the people getting the ports want to keep the invasion going just like the Chinese do. They both want to keep them going, right? And so Americans and Panamanians and everybody else have to look at this and go, wait a minute. These are predators that are fighting, and we're not part of their club. Irish, you're not a part of anybody's club. They want to get rid of you because you are indigenous people. You're as indigenous as the Cherokee and as the Imbra that I'm always out with in the Darien and the Kuna. You're straight up indigenous. Japanese are indigenous people. Yeah. Hardcore, really at the lower levels of the sediment, not like the latest indigenous. Irish are like indigenous, as it gets. I mean, somewhere back there, they probably fought somebody. And the same with the Japanese, they're indigenous. Now in Japan, they're trying to make this group, they're called the Ainu, empowering them to split them off. And the same thing they do everywhere, right? In anthropological warfare. And, but Ireland, at this rate, Ireland will be genocided. And when I gave that talk down in it's being, there's different levels of genocide. There's like the soft genocide where you just kind of change history and get them to not speak their own language and they just never even have to leave. You're welcome, but you have to speak English or whatever, right? It's kind of a soft and pleasant, like, just join us. But and sometimes it's much better for those people to join people that actually, wash their hands. You know what I mean? And so it can be much better, but then so that is actually a very soft genocide. Then there's the hardcore where you hand out machetes and the Hutus and Tutsi slaughter each other, right? And then there's a lot in between where we come in, they do a lot of rape and murder, and you just start moving out, right? And so a lot of that's happening. Irish are moving all over the place. Irish all the time I get daily briefings from Ireland. I mean, Irish all the time are moving to places like Panama. And I'm like, I would think twice before you move to Panama. I mean, because the same you're seeing in Ireland is coming to here, right? I can see it because, and it's coming to Thailand. I told Thais this, and they're like, you're out of your mind. You've lost your brain. I'm like, I'm telling you, this is my business. War is what I do. And I am telling you, all those those cannabis things, thousands of them that have come into play just in the last 2.5 years, they weren't there 5 years ago, right? I've been all over Thailand, north to south, east to west. I'm familiar with the thing. I'm familiar with Asia. I spent like 19 years in Asia. People often tell me, you don't know anything about Asia. You're not from, Korea or something. I'm like, okay, how many Asian countries have you been to? I've been like a lot of them, right? I've been all over. You're in an ecosystem. Asia is not Korea. You know what I'm saying? Asia is not Philippines. It's just like Europe is not Netherlands. It's like the point is I'm watching they're destroying Thailand. Why Thailand? Thailand is the hyphen in Indo-Pacific. There's a reason I've spent so much time in Thailand. Thailand is geopolitically very important. It's not quite up there with Panama, but it's second tier below that. Panama is like top tier, Suez top tier, Strait of Hormuz top tier, Strait of Malacca, which is near Thailand, top tier. But with Thailand, you can start going around Strait of Malacca if they build the Thai Canal, which is on the Kra Isthmus. I was just looking at that last year. But anyway, the first time I went to look at that project was 2014, actually. But bottom line is, I spent so much time in Thailand because it's important. The same reason I spend so much time in Panama and other places, because they're key, they're vital terrain. And I think that what you're going to see in Ireland is right now it's kind of going from soft genocide to a little bit firmer. There's a lot of murders now and rapes, and Irish are moving out, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, as they continue to bring more numbers in, you can play this chessboard any way you want to play it. You can go just keep moving more of these dark pieces in and get rid of the white Irish. You can play it like that and just push them off the board. Or you can turn out the lights and turn off the electricity and say, go get them, boys. The Irish turned off the lights and they want to kill you. And here's your machetes. Here's your gun. And then once they've done a hard genocide, then you can starve out the other people and reduce, because they don't want them either. They don't want all those people that they're bringing in. Why would you want people that can't read in any language? You know what I mean? What use are they? You know what I mean? They might want their children that they can raise in their own schools, of course, that they can raise like farm animals to be farm animals and try, quite literally, just meat robots, unserial numbered, fungible, unaccountable, right? I mean, they can, and this is the kind of evil that we're dealing with, right? And once you realize that we're dealing with deep levels of evil here, they will do stuff like that. And it is doable, right? It is doable. It has been done on small scales throughout history. It's just never been done on a global scale. And that's what they're working to do. Replace Europe, right? Replace Europe with these masses and then genocide them and keep what you want, the remnant, right? And and slowly, if their technology and other robots are able to do a lot of the work, you'll need fewer and fewer people. There are a lot of oligarchical systems at play here. Some, I think, don't actually want to reduce the global population and don't think it's going to happen. That's why they continue to expand certain infrastructure. Like there's people that want to expand the Panama Canal. I think they're not part of the global depopulation system. But then there's others that are like, why would they need to increase the size of the canal? There's going to be fewer people, fewer buyers, right?
One thing with Europe, and we mentioned obviously Europe is failing. But do you see it being a telltale sign of impending global war that now Volkswagen have decided to turn their attention to weapons manufacturing?
Well, can you imagine that? Volkswagen, back to guns. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing good comes out of this. And especially if you start recruiting these so-called migrants, right? Like into our army, right? And they already are. So the next thing you know, your army is like the Romans, right? You designed the organizational structure through little increments of greed and stupidity and ego and all these different things. There's some of them that are clearly want to do this, and they're big thinkers. And then there's a lot of other ones that get played because, hey, I'll do it because I'll get, enough gold and silver or whatever to live happily ever after. So they'll sell out their country or whatever, right? And that happens a lot. Right? So that happens all over the world. So there's those low level, and those are basically just the hireable traders. And, because they fall into the the mouse traps of mice, money, ideology, coercion, ego, right? And when these people are elected officials, and sometimes everybody who's running is part of that system. So whoever wins is going to be, it doesn't matter if it's Harris or Trump or whatever, because Trump he's not taking down the infrastructure for the invasions. He's just not, right? He's just not doing it. So I see his media team is, yeah, but look, the flows are so down. They are, but you turned off the water spigot. But when the flows were also down was during COVID, when the flows through the Darien Gap were not down to 2%. They were down to 0%. You know what I mean? Nobody was crossing. Nobody, right? It's like nobody. If you got caught, you're getting arrested. Right now, if you come through the Darien Gap, you'll still proceed. They'll let you go. They'll let you continue to the United States, right? So, so there's still a trickle coming through. The water pipes are still in place, and this is just a show. That's clear. That's amazingly clear.
I mean, considering, and this will be the last thing we'll discuss today because it's quite a concern. Considering the amount of people that have become refugees right throughout Europe, the UK, Ireland, Canada, right the way through the US and many other countries around the world, moving forward to what could be a global war, and especially, as you mentioned earlier, with the amount of Chinese people that were coming through, should people be absolutely concerned about the amount of possible sleeper cells that are in these countries that could be activated at any time to infiltrate the countries from within?
They should be more than concerned. They've already let themselves be invaded. It's not like, and you could get invaded and this could happen. You are invaded, past tense, in significant numbers, and numbers sufficient to genocide you right now. And a lot of these will be sponsored by like China, because clearly a lot of the people coming through are MSS or military or whatever. I've seen thousands with my own eyes come through. Some of these guys are straight up like, I don't know who this guy is, but he doesn't run a bakery. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and they clearly at times are coming through in units. Iranians, the same. Afghans, oh Lord, Chechens galore. So all the different potential sponsors and real sponsors like Chinese, they'll be there. And then there's the ones who will just stick together, like in a moment of stress or opportunity, they're gonna be a tribe, and the Irish or Americans mostly will not be tribed up, right? They're going to be one of the things when I've studied genocides around the world, I've noticed that one of the reasons that genocides occur is that when a war happens in the Anthro Insula, I call them the human islands of people that are within some country, let's say Turkey and the Armenians. So if you ask the Armenians, why, I went to Armenia and spent, I don't know, maybe a month there. I went to their genocide museum and that's right. I talked with a lot of them. And if you ask Armenia, I love Armenia. I wouldn't mind being there now. But if you ask the Armenians, why did this happen? They're like, because we're Christians and that, and because of that, right? Largely. And they're like, we lived with them for so long, but they turned on us because they're Muslims. But you go to Turkey, which I did, and ask the Turks, and they'll say, no, well, we didn't have anything against Armenians, but when the Russians came, the Armenians sided with the Russians. And then when we beat back the Russians, we screwed them up. You know what I mean? We went after the Armenians. And I see this over and over and over. I see it in studies of history. I see where some war happens and the group that's inside joins the outside force. If that outside force loses, your chances of getting genocided are high, right? And that's one of the things that happen with a lot of the Jewish communities when I see is sometimes they sided with the wrong side.
Yeah.
And then the tide goes out and you're left there naked, right? That's one reason. That's just one. And I've seen it with Armenians. I've seen it in different groups. It's just that you better choose wisely, and because this is just how the dance goes. It's quite dangerous, and also having all these anthro-insula, these human islands within your country is just. I mean, look what happened to the Romans. I mean, you are literally destroying yourself. Not maybe. You are as effectively destroying yourself as you could with any sort of nuclear weapon that doesn't make fire, right? It's nuclear level destruction, right? At the end of the day, you're gone, finished, right? And they burn down all your churches or whatever. Might save one for the museum, and it's over, right?
No, definitely. Now, we'll wrap this up now, but I do have to ask one more thing, because last time we spoke, I was asking you about where would be a safe place for people to live in the world, and you said you didn't know at that time, but you may know within 3 months. And everyone said to me after that interview that saw it was saying, when are you going to speak to him again? When are you going to speak to him again? Because obviously people are looking at strategic positioning to be safe themselves. I think things have got worse in the world, and I don't know whether you see it the same way as I do, but I don't think anywhere's safe. Did you ever come up with anywhere where you would say is safe or safer for people?
I would not pick Panama, but let me qualify that. A lot of the answer depends on who you are and what your capabilities are, right? Like if you're a billionaire, I'm going to talk with you and very differently than if you're like an average person that has to make one decision and it has to be as right as you can make it, right?
Yeah.
If you're a billionaire, I'm going to be like, well, I would get a place here, here, and there, and there. I would do it. I would set up a completely different architecture, right? But if it's a one shot and it needs to be the right shot, I would scratch off Panama, right? But if you're a billionaire, I'd get a place right here, right? I get a place here for various reasons, but it's a place that you can write off and you can easily leave. And that's one of the good things about it. You can easily leave it. You can get on the boat and be gone, or a plane or drive out or whatever, right? And it's a good lily pad hopping spot to go to South America or wherever. Argentina, I just spent 2 months down there, and I know a lot of people are quite sold on Argentina, and I'm just not as excited about it. I'm not saying I would not. Again, if you're a billionaire, I would get one for sure, and maybe Uruguay and that sort of thing. But that's a different sort of person. But I would scratch off Europe, obviously, in all places. I would scratch off the United States and in Canada, unless you're planning on going super remote, right? For a while, because we don't know how it's going to play out in the short term. And it depends on how you're looking at this. Are you looking at this long term or short term? I'd look at it long term only, right? And unless you're a billionaire, then you can do your short term lily pads. But for the long term, stay away from islands for every reason in the world, unless it's the most remote island ever and nobody's really lives there. and keeping in mind what that means, and where to go. It's difficult. Ask me again in another 3 months.
Yeah, no problem.
The thing is here's a problem I've noticed with people who are really paying attention to the situation. Those are the ones who are having the most difficulty deciding. The people that know a little bit pick places like Panama or Costa Rica instantly. The people who are more textured on this are much more circumspect. But I would definitely be prepared. One Canadian Army officer told me recently, he said, it's time to grow wings, not roots.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, that's what, like, a good group of people, some people that may know more about this would be actual Zionists, right? Because there's certain groups of people, like their whole structure through time, for a couple thousand, not Zion, you know, but the Jews have been living in other countries, right? And that's their whole architecture. They're like, there's a lot of people like that. There's a huge amount of people with no country. That's just the most well-known one, like Kurds. You know, Kurds are, and I went up to Belize to talk with Mennonites as an example, because I wanted to, they're leaving Belize and some are going to Suriname, right? And why did I want to talk with Mennonites? Because they're very practical farmer types, right? They're not into like all excitable stuff. You know what I mean? They're looking at water, rain, soil, you know, the government around it, that sort of thing. And the reason that they're leaving Belize is largely because when the jab time, and Mennonites produce a lot of the food of Belize, by the way. This is a big deal for Belize. But when the Belizean government tried to force or the globalists really tried to force the Mennonites into taking the jab, the Mennonites, like, they stuck together. Yeah. And they're like, nope. And they're like, nope. And nope, we're not taking it. And they didn't take it, right? And then the government of Belize started to realize, wow, we could lose our Mennonites. Like, they're not punking down, right? And now you can look online, and we talked with the Mennonites there. They're like, yeah, we're clearing land in Suriname right now. And you can see there's information more to make them stop in Suriname, actually.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, an incredible.
So let me one more thing. Yeah. To look at this. As much as where you're talking about where to go, is what kind of people will you be around? That's, you know, it's always where you're at and who you're with.
Yeah.
Because no man is an island, right?
No. We can't.
Only in the movies. So it is about, like, am I going to be with actually civilized people? Yeah, that's pretty, that have a skill set, right? And I do. I'm going to go back and look at Argentina again, actually.
Yeah, because I think building community and understanding each other is probably, if people are going to stay anywhere, regardless of where it is in the world, people just need to get past that divide and conquer that's been the split between so many people of race, religion, belief, sexuality, whatever. People need to see beyond that and start building communities that can stick together and survive whatever gets thrown at them, because the world isn't getting better day by day. And it's quite clear what's coming down the pipeline towards them. And I can only say to people, if you can't find where you want to be in the world, stay where you are and build your community together. And that would be at least something that can stand together and help grow food and feed each other and look after each other. Where you've got, you know, people.
Can I say one thing that's important? You don't have to leave if you stay where you're at and fight the ground you're on. Yeah. If Irish stand up for Irish, you don't have to leave. Just take it back. Take it back. Freedom is not something you ask for. Freedom is something you take. You physically take it, right? You don't, hey, can I have some freedom today, Daddy? No, Daddy ain't going to give you freedom. You have to, like, get rid of Daddy and take freedom. It's like, you know, and that's the way it goes. And if you don't have to leave if you defend the place that you're at. Like, why leave? You know, when you can just, first of all, like, all these Border Patrol and others that have been involved in actually helping invade the United States, you should have stopped helping at that time. But if that time comes again, don't continue to help invade the United States, which I have no doubt that many of them actually will do. And they'll go, oh, shucks, you know, well, we got to do it because, you know, we're little gears in the clock. We don't know what time it is, but I need to get my pension. I always say I need to get my pension. and like, I kept telling them, like, do you think this through for a little bit? Like, you're planting trees right now, planting trees. And will you be sitting in the shade of those trees? Are those trees going to fall on you, right? Because you're planting trees that are destroying you, right? You're planting trees that are destroying your children by just doing your job. You think you're thinking long term, but you're not. You're thinking like monkey level thoughts, like literally monkey thoughts. Monkey see, monkey get banana, monkey eat today, right? Yeah, well, you know, and then it's dead. Then we're dead. So all the monkeys loading up the buses, wearing uniforms, like, yeah, monkey get banana, monkey get retirement, and then monkey's dead, right? Because the trees are gone, monkeys are gone, right? And that's what's going to come to pass at this rate. You know, our own military forcing our own military to take the jab, right? I mean, we have no idea how many people are going to die from that, and how many are already dead, right? And let's see who was behind that. The guy that kept pushing the jab, safe and effective. Wait, the guy that got fooled by Fauci, and I'm supposed to believe him, right? The guy that got fooled by Fauci is supposed to be the most brilliant guy playing 5D chess. I think he is playing 5D chess. It's just that you're not on his side, right? He's on a different side than we're on, or depending on who you are, he might be on your side, but he's a psychopath. And that's why he was picked to be the condom for the real architecture that's doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great way to finish this, Michael. And it's, again, been an absolute incredible conversation that we've had. I always appreciate it. And as we always say here on the Atlantic Underground podcast, believe nothing and question everything. And I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to come back on, Chris.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.